Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PB Political Podcast. I'm Eshan Pokhrel.
And I'm Michael Bodeker.
And today we're back after a eventful week with the Iowa caucuses. We are back in history. We're getting very close to the present day, though, and today we are covering the 1992 presidential election. The last big three-way race, even though I guess you could say 96 was a little bit of it, but 1992, famously, Bill Clinton, the governor of Arkansas, George H.W. Bush, the governor of Texas, the vice president, not the governor of Texas, the former vice president under Ronald Reagan, who we covered in the last election episode, and independent businessman Ross Perot, who, even though he didn't win any electoral votes, had actually the most significant impact on a presidential election in the modern era for a third party, and also won the most votes with a whopping 19.7 million. So before we start getting into the nitty-gritty, Bodeker, you have anything to on the overview of this election?
This was a very interesting election. Obviously, we've had now 12 years of Republican dominance at the presidential level, and there's been economic growth that boomed over Reagan and it carried over through Bush. There was a recession, I believe, in 91, but their economy rebounded. But people kind of saw this as slow, the growth wasn't quite good enough, and so that definitely, I think, hurt Bush a little bit. His popularity boomed after the Gulf War, because that was I'd say probably the last, not last, but it was probably the most convincing American military success of the modern era. We were successful to varying degrees in Afghanistan and Iraq and whatever, but the Gulf War was an unquestionable American victory, pushed the Iraqis out of Kuwait, and Bush gained popularity because of how effective that was. And then you've got the Democrats here who are trying to rebound. Bill Clinton, who was unknown basically before this election, and then I believe he kind of catapults to popularity because of an alleged affair with a woman that he denied during the campaign trail, but in 1998, while he's president, he admitted it. You'll think of that what you will. Jerry Brown runs for president again from California. I believe this is at least his second cycle running for president.
I believe so. Yeah.
He actually did quite well in this cycle. But this is very interesting. I mean, H.W. Bush, he had a challenge from Pat Buchanan. That it kind of went away quietly. And then, Bush let Buchanan give a primetime speech at the RNC and probably pushed some liberal Republicans away as a result. So just a very interesting election. Dan Quayle's back. Shout out Dan Quayle.
Dan Quayle. Let me just before we get into and we're gonna talk about Clinton. We need to talk about Clinton's the Southern Democrat. But let me just shout out the rest of the candidates here, because you will never. I mean, it'll be a while before you see a Democratic senator from Nebraska and Bob Kerrey, who ran for the presidency, Tom Harkin from Iowa. Those are the main two, but and that plays into the bigger factor, which is Bill Clinton was the governor of Arkansas, and his running mate Al Gore was a senator from Tennessee. So, and I think we both agree this is probably the last. I would say Clinton is probably the last prominent Southern Democrat. I would say, at this stage, obviously he was president, and no one's gonna top that. But also, I think he might have been the most prominent Democrat. At least it really marks the end of the whole Southern dominance and I know there was obviously the state legislature in Alabama and Mississippi. It was dominated till 2010, so a Tea Party way. But I think this is the real. Reagan started the shift against the Democrats in the South, and I think Clinton is the last stand for them at the national level. And I think that's just kind of fascinating to look at, because when you look at the graph, I mean, Arkansas and Tennessee Democrats. I mean, not even that, they actually won both of those states, which you never see probably in the 2024 election, at least, barring something crazy that could happen in 2024 that 1992 had. So, yeah, I just found that interesting. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but...
No, I mean, I completely agree with you. This probably is the last stand for Democrats in the South. But you also it's interesting in the modern day, because, even though Clinton and Gore were more towards the middle, I think Gore's probably a little bit more liberal now than he probably was then. And maybe that's true for Clinton, but Clinton, I think, is looked back upon, and we'll talk about this later, fairly positively by both kind of Republicans and Democrats. Obviously, his personal life, I think, tars his reputation, but as a leader, I don't think Clinton is a very polarizing guy. And we'll get into that. But yeah, like, if you look at Clinton and Gore now, I don't think Clinton and Gore probably stand a chance in a Southern, like, gubernatorial or senatorial election. Like, Al Gore ran for Senate in Tennessee with the way Al Gore thinks now. He would get crushed. And probably the same for Clinton running for governor in Arkansas. It just, it's just interesting to see, like, Southerners in 1992 voting for, like, in Arkansas, voting for, a guy Clinton's not conservative. He's not a conservative guy. He's probably, he's a centrist. But it's just interesting to see that areas that are super, super conservative, not necessarily voting for people who are conservative.
Yeah.
Which I think is the biggest takeaway for me, and the thing that not confuses me, but is most interesting for analysis is, like, these super conservative areas that really not voting for, like, conservatives for a long time.
Yeah, it was a lot more relationship based, I guess you could say, which is interesting. And I think kind of we talked about it with the Iowa episode where, like, doing a lot of events in Iowa didn't necessarily translate. I actually think there's an inverse correlation in results in the actual caucuses, but I think that's a little bit more of a nationalized electorate we've gotten to as a country. And also, let me just say, Al Gore is only 75, so he could be the youngest candidate in this presidential race if he decided to run outside of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is, I believe, 70. But yeah, if you want to run Al Gore, I think you would be the youngest candidate. I think Trump is, 78? Right?
I think he's 77.
77? Yes, 77. So Al Gore, you would be the youngest outside of independent candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
A Clinton Gore ticket in this election would be the youngest pair.
Clinton Gore, Hillary Clinton and Al Gore. I don't know.
Yeah.
Could you imagine? Oh, Lord. Okay, anyways, let's get into the election itself. So this is actually a fascinating one in the sense that Perot was leading these polling and everything because the process to win these nominations, at least on the Democratic side, took forever. So Clinton, he wasn't necessarily, like, it wasn't a competitive race. It just took a while to actually clinch the nomination, I think is more of a better way to say it. So we had Perot leading Bush and Clinton and also Bush had a very a tumultuous presidency, poor economy, stuff like that. Perot, businessman, sort of. I guess the assumption is always if you're a businessman, you're going to be good on the economy, which I guess could be fair. I mean, that's kind of how President Trump got into office. He kind of just rode that tidal wave, but the economy wasn't even that bad. But anyways, yeah. So Perot was actually up early on, and then in what could be the biggest fumble in American history, in my opinion, it might be one of the biggest in electoral history. Once Clinton chooses Al Gore as his running mate, Ross Perot drops out of the race because he believes that a Democratic Party with actual energy behind it would lead to a contingent election, and even in that case, I don't understand why Ross Perot wouldn't want to force a contingent election. Like, I was very confused by this. Also, not to, like, diminish Clinton's his speech, he had a huge, very popular speech. Really did bring energy back into the Democratic Party. The New Covenant speech, pretty big thing, talking about the wealth gap. And yeah, so let's talk about this for a little bit. Why did Ross Perot drop out of the race?
I really want to put it towards just political, the lack of political savvy. That's the way that I'm going to put it. But also James Stockdale was not a particularly awesome pick for a running mate. Stockdale had some gaffes too on the campaign trail that just made him look kind of incompetent. So I didn't help Perot, but no, I think that if you're Perot, that your whole goal is to force a contingent election, which also, like, thinking about how a 1992 election would have gone from the House, because I mean, theoretically, right, your House is going to be made up of Republicans and Democrats. Who's going to vote for Ross Perot?
Absolutely, exactly. Like it makes no sense to me. I mean, let me bring up the 102nd United States Congress. So let's talk about contingent elections. If you guys don't know, contingent elections are when and we talked about this way back a couple months ago, but when no candidate reaches the majority threshold for electoral votes, the president is selected by the House of Representatives. They're selected. Each state gets one vote, so each member will vote within their state. The majority winner in that state will get the winner. Like, let's say in Alabama, there's 6 Republicans, 1 Democrat. Trump and Biden go to a contingent election this year. 6 Republicans, let's say, vote for Trump. That means Alabama will vote for Trump. So that's 1 vote for President Trump in the contingent election. So going to, let's look at the House first. Democrats were up huge in the House. Democrats had 259 seats. Republicans had 174 with 2 vacancies. I don't have the state-by-state breakdown here, but I could probably find it. But regardless, so the state-by-state breakdown, it looks like Democrats had a far majority in, like, even the states. Which, I mean, again, even looking at this map, Texas is majority Democratic. The whole South, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, all of these states are Missouri. All of these are southern. I'm not counting all of them as the South, but Florida's the only one that's not a Democratic state at that time. So honestly, I don't really get. I guess his Perot would be meaning that, like, he doesn't want to go to a contingent election because he would lose the contingent election, considering how many Democrats were in office. I guess, but you got to consider, though, that, like, there are 2 major party candidates on the ticket already. So just your presence, if it forces a contingent election, is a shift. And we've only ever had 1 contingent election, right? It was 1824, the corrupt bargain. No, well, we had 1800.
Well, 1800 too, yeah. So we've had 2 contingent elections. We haven't, at the time of this election, there hasn't been one in almost 170 years.
Yeah, no, I don't understand. I mean, I guess his thought was, like, he doesn't want to go to a contingent election then lose, because also you have to go to the Senate for the vice presidency. The Senate was run by Democrats as well, 55-45. But the interesting thing is, if you want to get even deeper into it, I guess states were. I mean, the Democratic Party wasn't as, like even the Republican, like, both parties are so rigid now, in, like, you have to vote for X or Y or whatever. I don't think that would have existed. People definitely would have had issues with Clinton's character, and I think Clinton would have. I'm not saying he would have lost, but I think it would have been a closer result than Perot would have expected. I clearly would have expected at the time, because I think and it's the same, and we can, like, to tie this to 2024. One of, like, I kind of want this to happen just because it would be very historic. I want to see a contingent election between President Biden and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., because then you're in a place. Of course, the House the House and the Senate will likely be much tighter, but then you'll have the question of, where do the partisans break? Like, there's Republicans there's Democrats that have been criticizing Biden, especially the progressive wing of the party has been criticizing Biden. They might not like Kennedy because of his previous, like, comments on vaccines and whatever else, but Kennedy's also, like, one of the most successful environmental lawyers in history. So it's like, where do progressives break? And then also on the Republican side, Kennedy's been pretty strict on, like, border policy as of right now. So it's also like, where will Republicans fall? Will they just give Biden the presidency, or will they vote for someone that's not their pick? It's a fascinating thing, and I just don't see how Perot. I don't understand his logic, is what I'm saying. That's just a long way to say that.
Yeah, I'm with you. And we should probably, we can talk about the Democratic nomination too. We've got, Ross Perot in here. On the Democratic side, you've got, we've talked about Jerry Brown already. We've talked about Bob Kerrey, Tom Harkin, Paul Tsongas from Massachusetts. Interesting that Tsongas actually runs on fiscal conservatism, which for Massachusetts, not that they can't be fiscally conservative, but they're usually typically more progressive, and I don't think fiscal conservatism would be something that someone from Massachusetts would run on in the modern day.
Typically, I think it'd be reversed. It'd be more fiscally progressive and socially conservative, you could say, in Massachusetts.
Yeah. But that was super interesting, and interesting that because Bush had a high approval rating after the Gulf War, that kind of dissuades like Mario Cuomo and Jesse Jackson from running. And I wonder if Perot would have run had either of the two of them run. I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, yeah, Jesse Jackson, actually, we didn't even mention last. I don't think he was in the 88. I think he was in the 88 election or in the 84 where he actually did end up doing pretty well. But he didn't end up, winning. So he did win delegates, but he didn't end up making a real challenge. But yeah, I think the race would have absolutely been different. He could have been a juggernaut. And then, getting back. So let's go back into the general. So after Perot dropped out, now you have Clinton, a revitalized Clinton, let's say. We're going to keep using that. Just doing, campaigning. Quayle and Bush and Quayle were very, because I guess it's hard to attack someone with such a mass appeal. I mean, you have a dominant, the House and the Senate are majority Democrats. Like, the party is in more of a power structure than typically it has been, when you're basically fighting against the party as president when you're campaigning here. So they went after his character. Probably the best way to attack him. He's very popular, very likable guy. People really like Bill Clinton. I think at a personal level, which he's a very popular person, which I guess to the detriment of Bush and Quayle. But then in September, he's back. Ross Perot. Okay, I don't know what happened. I actually did read once that I don't know if this is true, but I think I saw that he was supposedly Perot was kind of, he wasn't ready for the criticism he would get from running for president and everything. So he kind of just couldn't take the criticism and dropped out. But then I don't know this is actually something I read. I can't really confirm this, but and then because of that, after he dropped out, I guess he saw that there's actually something to do, or he could actually win, and then he got back in. So he kept qualifying. I believe he kept qualifying for ballots even though he dropped out. So that was kind of a smart move. He kept trying to get on ballots just in case if he did come back, he would be on every ballot. And that was a smart move because he got onto all 50 states ballots and he re-entered the race. And this is actually kind of interesting because this is where the famous, not really famous, pretty famous to us, the 3-person debate starts, where you have Bush, you have Perot, and you have Clinton, which is something that I think that was what really boosted his numbers, right? In the end, the fall season, as we go in, because he was out of the spotlight for a couple months after leading the polls, and then comes back into the debate stage, and that's just kind of what ended up happening with Perot. I'm still confused about why he did that. I think he could have won the presidency had he, kept running for president.
Well, the thing is later he came out and was no, actually Republican operatives were trying to mess with my daughter's wedding or something. It's come on, Ross.
Who knows? Who knows?
Who knows? But that's the reason to drop out of the race for president.
That is odd. That's odd. I agree. I don't know. We don't really know what happened. I'm sure you could find it somewhere. His public reason was that, and then also the House, the contingent elections, which I just don't understand the contingent election reasoning. I don't understand why he. It doesn't make sense. I don't know. It makes no sense. I think, but honestly, frankly, considering that, it's still crazy how he still received 19% of the vote in the actual election. And let's get more into the election itself. So again, going into the election, we have Bush, Clinton, and then you have Perot polling in the 10, the lower, not even 10%, in the single digits, high single digits. But then the debates really changed that. He came out pretty strong in the debates. People started realizing why they actually were fans of his. And we go into election day. Wasn't enough, unfortunately, for Perot to win. I believe Perot's closest, he almost won Maine's 2nd congressional district, which actually kind of makes sense. Maine is Maine elects, Angus King. independent senator from Maine, has been elected multiple times over.
Collins.
Susan Collins, she's not an independent, but she might as well be an independent. Yeah, so Maine almost gets him, but Clinton ends up winning in a landslide, and not in a landslide with the popular vote, which this is actually, so this is where we can discuss, I guess, a little bit more. So how much do you think, if Perot didn't exist here, how much more of the popular vote do you think Clinton would have won? For context for our listeners, he won 43% even. So how much more do you think he would have won from Perot had he not been in the race?
I actually think it really looks to me that Clinton, the Perot hurt Clinton more than Bush. I used to kind of before just kind of thinking about it, looking at the numbers, just before having actually analyzed the selection, I thought, Perot, looking at Bush's numbers, I think Perot hurt Bush. But then you kind of look at it and it's like, well, I don't actually know. I kind of think that Perot hurt Clinton more. Just because, if you looked at the numbers, before Perot, Bush and Clinton and Bush were it was 50. Clinton was clearing 50 and Bush was not even hitting 40. So I think that there was definitely an impact, and the fact that Bush's campaign welcomed Perot as a way to kind of get even, to get closer to even with Clinton. I think Perot hurt Clinton a little bit more, and I think that you could have seen kind of a blowout if Perot wasn't there.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily believe that. Actually, I firmly don't believe that Perot's votes just would have went to one of the other two candidates. I think a lot of his voters probably weren't even going to turn out. This election actually had 5% more turnout than the last one. So I actually think that Perot definitely tapped into a new demographic, which is something that candidates always try to do. Something that the current independent challenger of the day, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., wants to do. So I think through all of that, I can't really... I would say, but yeah, that's what I was wondering, because Clinton did get a low. That is a low. 43 is a relatively low number for the popular vote, especially considering the electoral destruction. 370 electoral votes to Bush's 168. 32 states and D.C. carried to Bush's 18. So definitely a big win. I would say one of the bigger wins in electoral history, obviously. So, yeah, and Clinton... I don't know if we want to get into the Clinton administration. I guess now Clinton's not really been... Clinton's been in the news for very bad reasons, with the whole Jeffrey Epstein list and testimonies becoming public. Not great. But, I don't know. Do you want to get into the Clinton administration? I know we're crunched on time.
Yeah. Turns out... as effective as a leader as Bill Clinton was, the Bill Clinton, the person, is quite different.
Yep.
As we found, but his administration, the thing that I always like to note about Clinton's administration is this little trivia question, which is, the last time the United States actually held a budget surplus was the year 2000.
Yep.
Neither of us were alive.
Nope.
But it was during Bill Clinton's administration. So the work that Clinton did in terms of reducing the deficit, I think is what has been respected the most about him. There's the, the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act. There's the 1994 crime bill, which actually was looked upon kind of favorably when it was signed. Joe Biden was, I think, one of the major players in that bill. And now it's kind of looked back on kind of unfavorably as a tool of mass incarceration.
Yeah, no, President Biden was hammered on the debate stage during the primaries, the 2020 primaries, by everybody on that issue, yeah.
Which is interesting because, looking at crime data, actually, crime in the United States has gone down drastically since the 90s, and especially since the 94 crime bill. So, you could, there are plenty of arguments, but, I wouldn't hammer the Clinton on that quite as much. I think that reducing crime, if you're locking people up, probably a good idea. But the merits, whatever. NAFTA's a big one. won the ratification of NAFTA, which obviously is not existent anymore. President Trump got that modified with USMCA, but NAFTA was a major part of American trade for about 25 years. Nominates Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Stephen Breyer to the Supreme Court. Justice Ginsburg, rest in peace, and then Justice Breyer just retired, I believe, 2 years. Is it 2 years ago now?
It might have been 2. Well, yeah, it was like 2-ish years. Yeah, it was, and then about 2 years.
Yeah. Clinton expands NATO into the old Eastern Bloc, which I think we would all probably say is a pretty big win. Kosovo, it's, thank you, USA, you are my best friend. Kosovo loves Bill Clinton.
They don't know. They don't know about the allegations.
And he had the welfare reform, expand health insurance. Interesting is that Clinton actually tried to get universal health care, which is fascinating considering kind of his centrist support, but obviously he didn't get the support in Congress for that.
Well, I think universal health care coming from like a Southern politician makes sense because you see, rural areas, very poor access to health care, very typically poorer areas of the country. I kind of get the push from him. I see how Bill Clinton got to that, even though he was a centrist. And now I think healthcare was that was a much more centrist opinion then than it is now. And also it's become more leftist just because of the way that it's been framed. And obviously it doesn't help that, I guess, and this isn't even necessarily a bad thing, but it doesn't help the case of the idea that Senator Bernie Sanders has been the biggest and most consistent proponent of it, obviously considering he's one of the more left-wing members of the Senate. But I think universal healthcare, honestly, I think was fairly centrist until a certain point, until I don't know. And I think with a balanced budget, it made sense. It's definitely something that made more sense to be centrist when you have a balanced budget, which I think is a lot of the pro, for me at least, like you said, of Clinton.
Or even look at it second term, he kind of deregulates the financial and telecoms industry. Deregulation, that's a big conservative talking point, especially now. For a Democrat, that's fascinating. But then the kind of the big kahuna, Clinton's the second president to be impeached. He was not removed. I don't think it was particularly close either, but he's the second person to be impeached by the House of Representatives. The Monica Lewinsky affair, which obviously, as we know, now definitely happened, and he did lie about it.
Yeah.
But impeached, not removed. And he's the second president. Now, there's now been 3. President Trump impeached twice, and removed neither time.
Yeah. So, yeah, Clinton was definitely one of the presidents. I think, honestly, just the balanced budget, I would love that we'd get back to it. I think post 9/11, that gave the security apparatus all they needed to increase their budgets, but also gave all of Congress anything they wanted to increase the budgets for their little districts on sometimes unnecessary projects. I said it, guys, sorry. But, I guess that's the biggest takeaway for me, at least, of Clinton, is that, outside of his personal stuff, which I'm not going to talk about, but, presidentially, his balanced budget was nice, I guess you could say. It was a great thing to have. It's definitely it was definitely an era of fiscal responsibility I don't think we're going to really ever be able to claw our way back to, even though we have people that want to get there. But, yeah.
I think we're running I think it's $1 trillion a year in a deficit now.
That's
it's
ridiculous.
$1 trillion deficit.
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. So,
I think at this time national debt is $5 trillion or something like that. $7 trillion.
It's high. I don't know the exact number, but it's high. So yeah.
I don't know if I could track that real quick. Let's just do national debt 2000, right?
Yeah, but also let me just, while you're doing that, Ross Perot did run again in 1996. Did not get as much attention. He did end up with 9% of the vote, and we really are we're really zoning in on Ross Perot this episode because we kind of want to draw a parallel to what could happen in the 2024 election. We have an incumbent president, President Biden, currently poor economy, kind of the similar situation as President Bush at the time, I would say, which is kind of interesting. But then you also have, this is a little different in the sense that you have President Trump coming up, most likely, like we discussed last week, coming at it again. Shouldn't be, I think it'll be Trump Biden. It's pretty much kind of guaranteed at this point, barring any extraneous events that we don't want to see happen. And then we have an independent, I would say the most credible independent since Ross Perot, in Robert F. Kennedy Jr., obviously of the Kennedy family. We've covered his switch to the independent party, or not the, to an independent candidacy on our website. But yeah, I mean, just to bring this into 2024 a little bit, or I'll let you hit the budget first, and then we'll go into this. But
yeah, so the federal budget, or the budget debt by year, $5.67 trillion in 2000, which was 55% of nominal GDP. Which that debt to GDP ratio pretty solid. And what is the debt to GDP ratio now? 123%.
Insane.
That's been one generation.
It's crazy. So yeah, I mean, hopefully there's a world we get that reined in for the sake of everybody. But so, yeah,
I guess we should we rank him now? Do we rank him?
Yeah, let's talk about 2024 real quick. Let's tie it in, then we'll rank them. So yeah, 2024, we have a very credible three-way race. It could be more. I mean, we have potential. I don't think there's any auction for more than 3 candidates, in the sense like no labels. The centrist political party or political group, whatever they are, they don't really ever call themselves a political party, but they have been flirting with the idea of running a candidate. It doesn't look like they're going to do it as of now. But we do have Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He's polling at 15% in the national polling. Now, he kind of hovers around this number state by state. He's had polling where I wouldn't necessarily call them outliers, because they're pretty frequent, where he hits the 20s. He had 22 in Quinnipiac's last 3-person race poll. So I don't know if we can classify him as competitive to win the election yet, although I would love to have a third-party candidate in contention to win an election. But I think he definitely will have a massive impact on this race, and especially if he continues at that 15% threshold, which is the threshold that the debate commission has always specified is the third party, is for, like, if you hit 15%, you're allowed on the debate stage. If he can maintain a 15% showing across the country, I actually think there's only room for him to go up, because he's still kind of unknown and people still aren't tuned in. I don't think there's any reason he would drop at this point. I think this could be a very fascinating race, similar to 1992. What do you think, Bodeker?
Well, and I think, not the unfortunate thing, but I think it's somewhat unfortunate that it's really hard for RFK to force a contingent election, because that would mean he has to take electoral votes. Because obviously, like, if he just hits 20% in every state and Trump or Biden split the rest, right, then they'll just win by a plurality. They'll win the plurality. They won't win the majority, and that's all they need. There's no, like, offs or anything. So, in order to force a contingent election, RFK has to win electoral votes. And he has to win probably a decent amount, too. He's probably got to pick up Rust Belt states, which I think actually could be – that's probably his most feasible area. I don't know if you would agree with me, but I think –
the Rust Belt?
RFK – yeah, I think RFK's most feasible areas to pick up, like Michigan or Wisconsin, even Ohio. I think Kennedy's like 2008 Ohio, kind of, in a way.
Yeah, we haven't talked about the general election much, but like I know in Michigan, there's been a huge anti-Biden swell among particularly Muslim Americans because of the whole Israel and Hamas conflict, whatever the war that's going on over there, and Biden's role in it and our handling in it. They have not been fans of it. Obviously, if you're Muslim American, you might not be a fan of it. And that's a very big population. It's not like a make or break population in any state, but it is an outsized population in the Rust Belt, especially in Michigan, where a lot of, I mean, that's not necessarily saying if they're going to go to Kennedy or going to go to Trump, but they're not going to go to Biden from what it seems like. And I've actually spoken to a lot of my friends and like people around my like orbit, I guess you could say, that feel the same way. They won't vote for Biden. because of, and so this is like Biden's really not playing him. He's really not helping himself, and he's really finding ways to go out of his way to help RFK Jr. right now, which is, I think, and the only strategy that it seems like the Biden campaign has is, oh, they're going to come back when they see that it's Trump versus Biden again, which, I mean, who knows? Maybe, but I mean, I don't know. But also, maybe he'll lose in New Hampshire. Wouldn't that be crazy if President Biden lost in the first primary on Tuesday in New Hampshire to Dean Phillips, the generic congressman of the year? That would be wild. But yeah.
But let's see. Let's hope that RFK doesn't drop out like Perot does and totally destroys candidacy.
I don't think he'll do that. We'll hope. We'll hope he doesn't do that just for the sake of competitive elections. But yeah. Is that everything, I guess? Everything?
Yeah, I think, do we want to rank Clinton? Then we can get out of here.
Let's rank Clinton. I do love a balanced budget. So I'm going to put him in the top 20. He's actually very highly ranked by scholars, right?
Yeah, he's pretty generously ranked. He's usually always considered an above average president. I would agree. I think Clinton is probably, this might be a hot take, but I think Clinton truly might be the last like really good president that we've had.
Maybe, yeah. No, actually might be fair. I mean, I think post 9/11 everything's kind of been thrown out of whack.
Yeah, I think we're kind of out of an equilibrium at the moment, but I think Clinton did for all of his personal character issues, because there are plenty. Clinton almost in that way is like a Trump without the polarization. Yeah. That people like kind of questioning his character. So besides the character stuff, like I think some of his policy was actually quite sound. Especially in the areas that he wasn't expected to do well, like internationally, like with foreign affairs. I don't think that was an area he was like Bush dominated him on that because Bush had the experience. But I think Clinton performed unexpectedly well in that area, and especially combining, getting a balanced budget, which now is a huge like conservative, like Republican talking point, and getting that as a Democrat, I think, is a big step up and a big sign of respect.
Yeah. I think, that's well said. So that's about everything about Clinton. Thank y'all for listening. Second episode in this week. It's because we have elections coming up, so we've been working overtime, making sure everybody gets the proper and informative news on those. We have the New Hampshire primaries, the first in the nation, next Tuesday. We have both Republicans and Democrats, probably Nikki Haley's last stand. I think Ron DeSantis is pushing his last stand to South Carolina. I don't think it's going to matter. I don't know why he's going to South Carolina. He's pulling out like 11%, so it's kind of weird. But Nikki Haley is basically putting all her eggs in this basket for the most part, and then she goes to her home state in South Carolina where she might get embarrassed. So this is going to be a fun one to watch. It's really my end speculation on the Republican side, but also President Biden has to make sure he performs well in New Hampshire when he's facing challenges from Dean Phillips, congressman from Minnesota's 3rd, and Marianne Williamson, who I don't really know how to classify, but she is an author, I will say that, and I guess activist. Bodeker, do you have any predictions for New Hampshire? What's a successful number for Biden before we leave? What does Biden need? And keep in mind, he's not on the ballot. It's a write-in campaign they completely were like, yeah, we'll just not get on the ballot in New Hampshire because we're going to push it back. It was a whole thing. Where does Biden need to land to be successful on Tuesday?
Because it's of the weird like quirks with it, like I think it's gonna be really fascinating to see what he gets. I can't imagine he doesn't get any. He loses. I think that would be fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think, right? I mean, he's even in like write-in polling, he is still hovering around 40 to 50%. That being said, Dean Phillips, again, congressman, I mean, I don't think there's really much of a way to classify him other than like a younger Joe Biden, but I think a much nicer man, I would say. Dean Phillips definitely, he's definitely putting in work in New Hampshire, if anything. And I think, I think he was polling at 28% in the last American Research Group poll, whoever that is. Don't know if that's credible, but 28%, not too bad. In New Hampshire, I think we can both agree. I think Biden needs to win with over 60% to still not face any questions, although there should be plenty of questions about him being, the president right now. He's 81 years old. But we'll see. We'll be back with that analysis hopefully Wednesday. And yeah, so thank y'all for listening. Go to the website. We got good content coming out every day or so. And yeah, thank y'all for listening. I'm Eshan Pokhrel.
I'm Michael Bodeker.
And goodbye.